All I got to say is be glad you don't hear the pre-show. Welcome, everyone, to Line Upon Line. This is episode 254 of Line Upon Line, and we're going to talk about, does the Bible support a large central government or less government? So, Dr. Ricks, if you would start us out, that would be wonderful.
Okay. This joke is called The Teacher Juror. As a potential juror in an assault and battery case, the teacher was sitting in the courtroom answering questions from attorneys on both sides. The assistant attorney general asked, had I ever been mugged? Did I know a victim of a defendant? The defense attorney took a different approach. He said, however, I see you're a teacher. What do you teach? And the teacher said, English. English and the theater, I responded. I guess I better watch my grammar, said the defense attorney. No, shot back me, I said, the teacher. You better watch your acting. At what point, the whole courtroom died down in horrible laughter. Yeah, watch your acting. By the way, here's a real short one. If you combine the name FedEx and UPS, they're going to merge to be the giant delivery company, FedEx and UPS. What will the new name be? It will be Fed Up.
Hey, I like my delivery people. They bring me all kinds of neat stuff.
This is called Coffee Choices. At our home, we tend to get the children to help out. One day, my youngest son came into the living room and asked, Mom, does anyone want a cup of coffee? We said, yes. He said, what kind of coffee do you want? Capitated or decapitated? Okay, this is just a teeny bit of farmer's advice. The farmer says, when you're riding on your John Deere tractor, remember, a bumblebee is considerably faster than a John Deere tractor. And the farmer also says, when you're out in the field, do not corner something that you know is meaner than you are. Okay. Here's the shocker joke of the day. The old man and the physical. An 80-year-old man goes to the doctor for his physical. The doctor checks him out and says, well, physically, you're in reasonably good shape. How are you mentally? He says, well, I have a great mind connection with God. The doctor says, what do you mean? Well, every night I have to get up to go to the bathroom. God turns on the light for me. After I use the bathroom, God turns off the light. The doctor can't believe it. He calls the man's wife. He tells the man's wife what he says about going to the bathroom. God turns on the light, off the light. See how his mind is working. His wife says, that idiot, he's been peeing in the refrigerator.
I'm not there yet.
That's they talk to you to tell that joke.
That could be in your future.
My wife says after you hit 50 that most of the conversation in the house is yelling what from the other room. and it's not because our hearing's bad, it's because we have the TV so loud,
Oh yeah, that's because your hearing's bad.
Yeah, I could tell a joke about hearing, but I'll save that for another day. Get over. Today we're going to look at, does the Bible support large, big central government, or does the Bible support less government? Socialism is where the government gets big, big, big and runs everything, or at least a lot of things. Does the Bible support socialism? The reason I ask the question is, every so often, you'll be watching the news, and some elite mind trust, they try to use the charitable aspects of the Bible to say the Bible supports big socialist government. Now, usually they don't use the Bible except when they want to use it. It's kind of like when they want it, they use it. And are they correct? Does the Bible have maybe no preferences between big, huge government and little, small government? What does the Bible say about the welfare state? By the way, you could read about the Roman Empire and the welfare state too. The Roman Empire is kind of interesting. Once they got the welfare state started and certain people ran for political office in Rome, promising more and more free stuff, it became impossible to turn the tide back. That's just a historical note to keep in mind. Anyway, let's look at our first slide.
All right. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. For even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat.
Let me ask you, Ken, does that scripture surprise and shock you?
Not me. It's I don't know why it would shock anyone. It pretty much makes sense. Some people think there's a different interpretation of that, but I think it stands on its own. If you don't do what you need to do to feed yourself, then you're not going to be able to feed yourself.
You know what Ben Franklin said? He said, when the immigrants moved to this country, do not help them gather wood and do not help them build homes. Do not help them store supplies. For the first winter they're here, they shall surely have a near-death experience. But the second winter, they will have shelter, they will have food, they will have supplies, you know. And I think that's good thinking.
But I heard this on news that 75% of illegal aliens are on welfare in America. That's a shocking stat. Shocking stat. But you have to admit, Paul is very blunt in what he said. And let me ask Kelly, do you think that statement's true, that idle hands are the devil's plaything?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. If you're not kept busy doing something, you sit around looking for something. I mean, even the person who does nothing gets bored. And I don't care what the reasoning is, they get bored, so they start looking for stuff. They look for things to occupy themselves. And most of the time, what people find to occupy themselves with are things that they shouldn't be occupying themselves with, because that's the easiest thing to do. So, yeah, I believe that if you're not doing anything productive, then you leave yourself open for Satan to use or to mislead you off. Now, I was looking for the scripture, couldn't find it. But I know there's a scripture that talks about leaving like the corner or the last row of your garden for the widows and the orphans. And what's always struck me about that is, again, it's saying you need to take care of the widows and the orphans, but it doesn't say go out and pick it and put it in a basket and take it and deliver it to their home. It says leave it there and let them come and get it themselves, which again implies that we can be charitable, but you still need to do something for it. Even if it's just come to get it or come to collect it or whatever. It's not just to be handed to anybody, regardless. That's, I know there's people who have disabilities and things or are in bad shape, but pretty much I've seen a video, it's been a while now, that kind of put things in perspective for me whenever I start feeling sorry for myself or feel like things are a little rough. And it was a man who goes out to schools and he gives motivational speeches to the kids there. He was born with no arms and no legs, but yet he comes hops up some stairs onto a table, and he literally walks back and forth with no legs across the table while he's talking to the kids, talking about what he had to do, what he had to learn, and the things that he's able to do. And when I see that, I'm like, if you really think about it, pretty much anybody, no matter what their situation is, can do something productive. They just have to be willing to do it.
My joke is a little serious. Is washer cram. They can be on an assembly line and assemble something as it comes by. you can be in a wheelchair and cram a washer or tighten a bolt or put something into something. They can, and then they'll feel productive because at the end of the assembly line, their hand touched something that became something, and they can have a sense of pride and productivity. You know.
I think one of the good things that they've done, some veteran groups have done, they've donated special mechanized wheelchairs to veterans. And at least I know in some places, some post offices, other places, they've given those veterans jobs. And I think that's wonderful. If you are disabled, like you say, David, let them do something, but still take care of them. I'm not saying don't take care of them. Give them the wheelchair and whatever they need and training. But if let's look at the next slide. I think it's wonderful people be productive regardless of their circumstance.
All right. And real quick, Kelly, the verse you were looking for was Leviticus 23:22, just so you know.
Thank you.
Second Thessalonians 3:11. For we hear that there are some who walk among you in a disorderly manner, not working at all, but are busybodies. Now those who are such we command and exhort through our Lord Jesus Christ that they work in quietness and eat their own bread. But as for you, brethren, do not grow weary in doing good.
Normally, Paul is responding to problems in his epistles. It's obvious that in Thessalonica and probably other places as well, there were people who were living off the church's charity, because churches, I know, at least we know they had a charity for widows and probably other things as well. And Paul says, if they're able-bodied, make them work.
You know, I've mentioned this maybe once before, but you were talking about this young man that comes out with no legs and no arms. I was at Midas maybe 20 years ago, and there was this woman there. She had legs, she had no arms. They were at the shoulder. She had no arms at all, no stubs, anything. She was there getting her car back from this Midas shop, and there was a young man with her. Maybe it looked like maybe her boyfriend. He looked like maybe he was a little slow or something, but he looked normal. And in my mind, I watched her handle the transaction, and they were getting out of the car. And in my mind, I fully expected him to get in the driver's seat and her to get in the passenger seat. But she got behind the wheel, put that car in drive with her foot, and drove with her other foot. And while this other man sat in the passenger seat. That has never left me to this day, and it never will. That she didn't let anything stop her from doing what she needed to do. And I think it was an old Grand Prix or something. She got in the driver's seat, backed it up, drove away like nothing.
I really think it's a mindset. You just have to set your mind that regardless of what's thrown at you, regardless of what you're facing, is you're going to overcome it.
Yep.
And by the way, a lot of times we complain about handicapped parking space. They got all those spaces in front. But let's face it, we're blessed that we don't need to use them. But one thing is clear when you read the Bible, Christianity is about being a giver and not a taker. It's not good for you spiritually to take advantage of the system, or for the system to be set up to encourage you to take advantage of it. Some politicians, like in Rome, the term they used was the rabble of Rome. They used them for political purposes, gave them free stuff. But that was bad for Rome and bad for the individuals getting the free stuff. If we really love people, we'll help them to be more self-reliant.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a pride. I know too much pride is a bad thing, but there is some pride in taking care of yourself, taking care of your own, and improving your status and those around you.
And maybe pride's not the word. Maybe it's just self-worth, a value of yourself. We call it the 3% rule. Thousands of people enter a Boston Marathon, and a good percentage of them finish the race, but 3% collapse 100 yards, 200 yards before the end. Yet they drag themselves over that. And you got other people who collapsed 20 miles ago, and they just gave up and stopped. And I think if we enable the people we give them a a path to drag themselves up. When they get across that line, they stand up and go, you know what? I skipped my knees and my elbows, but look at me, I did it. And that sense of value is so important, that we teach it to our kids as well. But a sense of value is so important in order to help somebody live a more productive life overall, because then they become sedentary, and then they become, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. But if they have that, I can do it. And that, honestly, that comes from belief in God as well, because God gives you hope. And if you have hope through Jesus Christ and God the Father, we won't give up. We'll be in that 3% that drag ourselves through whatever it is we have to overcome to be prepared at his return.
I think that's actually a good illustration is race, because I've seen video of people who stop just short of the finish line. And, you have people who come out, and they don't pick them up. They don't help them across. They cheer them on. They encourage them from standing beside them. Come on, you can do it. Just a little bit further, 1 foot in front of the other. Just come on. And I look at the church playing that role, that we as brethren, when someone's having a hard time, we encourage them. We help them with encouragement and help them to focus on the hope that David talked about, so they can see it. And that's what we do. We don't grab them and pull them across the finish line. We encourage them to be able to do it themselves.
And, in a large central government, things like that are not encouraged. No. In a socialist environment, that is not encouraged. We're all equal. Everybody gets a trophy. That's what leads up to an oppressive large government. There's marathons. You talked about a marathon. What are they, 24, 26 miles?
26.2, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's things out there called an ultra marathon. An ultra marathon is 100 miles plus. And there's people that do that. And I read an article at one time, the guy who ran an ultra marathon out in the desert. And we're talking temperatures 120 degrees up and down. And this guy said he thought he was strong enough to do this, but he couldn't. He said 20 to 24 miles or so from the finish line, his body aches, and the lactic acid had built up so bad he could barely go. But his buddy ran with him the last 20, 24 miles, 20, whatever it was. His buddy ran a marathon, encouraging him to make that 100 miles. And he didn't carry him across the line. He pushed him mentally and encouraged him to make it. Now, he'll never forget that. And if he had given up, or someone had, stuck him in a car, in these marathons, they got these things called broom wagons, where they come up, and if you can't make it, they just come pick you. Basically, you're laying on the side of the road because you've done, and they pick you up and you're done. Your marathon is over. You aren't going to make it. No one wants to get into the broom wagon because you've given up and you've quit. And that's what a large central government is there for. It makes it real easy to give up and quit. Well, they'll just send me a check. They'll just take care of me. That's not a thing. There's nothing in the Bible that promotes giving up and quitting. In fact, we are told to endure till the end, to fight the good fight, and to make it till the end, not to give up, not to succumb to the smooth talking and to the wiles of the devil, or whatever, however it's put, to kind of get us to give up and quit. But large central governments want us to give up and quit. That way we are easily controlled.
Well, kill your incentive from birth, and they don't have to deal with you.
And from reading the scriptures, Paul did not want the church to be an enabler of making people weaker. By the way, some people will say, especially some elite will say, well, wasn't the Christian church in its first form a commune, like a communist commune, everything in common? Let's go to our next slide and answer that question for those who don't understand that, them all being together there in Jerusalem.
All right, we're looking at Acts 5:2. And he kept back part of the proceeds, his wife also being aware of it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the price of the land for yourself? While it remained, it was not your own, or was it not your own? So while it remained, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your own control? Why have you conceived this thing in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God.
By the way, in a total communist country, if you were to tell the government, well, I want to keep part of my money and assets and property. By the way, there's no private property in real total communism. I want to keep it under my own control. Well, you'd end up, well, at least in Stalin's Russia, in the Gulag or worse. So it's obvious that the church did not have any coercive taxation type policy. It was pure charity. Charity is voluntary. The problem is Ananias wanted to get the credit without actually doing the charitable work. And after that happened, people realized that you cannot, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. You can't trifle with God. And that's really what he was doing for political. He was trifling with God, and God let it be known that you can't manipulate God's church that way.
You know, I watched a video of a lady whose family moved here from a communist country, and she's very conservative and very much into her church. She does a lot of talk about salvation and stuff, and some of it I think I agree with. But anyway, she was talking about what it was like when the government took everything for you. Every day on the way home from school, being taught what the government told them to teach you, you were worried that would your mother and father be home when you got there, or would they be under arrest? Would you have a home, or did the government seize it for one of their needs? And now your entire family's on the street because the government decided they needed that for whatever their need was, that it was better for everybody else that you were homeless. And she said, you live every day in trepidation of, am I going to have a home? Am I going to have mom and dad? Are they going to arrest my parents and snatch me up and put me into some kind of an orphanage where now I don't even go to school? And that's the government of man right there.
By the way, there was in the Bible, God had a small government. It was primarily, really, basically, it was local government. You know, like in any particular city, you had the elders that met in the they call it the gates of the city, but you know, that was sort of like our version of city hall or county courthouse, and basically that was the government. And they had Levites to help them adjudicate, you know, legal matters and crimes. But basically, everything was local. And if they had a national problem, they'd go to the high priest, and or God would send them a special prophet. But all government was local. Then suddenly, Israelites wanted to change that. And let's go to the next slide, because it's a very important piece of history. And the way God responds to it shows you what he thinks of man's super government.
That was interesting. I don't know why it did that. There we go. 1 Samuel 8:4. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord.
The word there, nations, is also heathens and pagans. You know, think about it. I don't know that I want heathens and pagans ruling over me or living that lifestyle. Their retirement plan is the worst. It's disease and pestilence and war and torture and that's. But the word nations there, if you do a little research around, you'll see that some interpretations will say heathens. I don't know that I want to live under the government of heathens. I mean, we are, but I wish I wasn't, you know.
But, you know, I like the interesting, and it's mentioned several times in that part of the scripture, we want to be like all the other nations. Because all the other nations had, as far as we know, had big central governments, probably, you know, some kind of castle for the king, big standing army, their version of the IRS. We wouldn't call it that, but they collected taxes by force. In the theocracy of God, there was no IRS. If you didn't tithe, it was between you and God. You were either blessed or not blessed based on whether you tithe, but there was no one normally kind of force it out of you. It was, it was you and God. Everyone, well, basically you had a closer relationship with God. I mean, there were priests where you had to go through the priest for certain religious activities, but still, basically, it was God ruling over Israel. And they wanted to be like all the other nations. I think of that when I think of one thing. I hear all the politicians say, well, every other nation has socialized medicine. Why can't we have it? And I don't know why that seems similar to me, but do you see a similarity in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, we've had people who live here in the United States, we've had the American life, and we know what that means. But instead of embracing that, we're looking at other countries and say their way is better than our way. And the biggest one is it's about healthcare, because people look at the high cost of healthcare. People, just about everybody has had to go to the doctor and had to face the bills from the testing and stuff. If you've had to go have an MRI, the bill you get for that and how expensive it is, especially if it was before you had insurance and things that you had to try to come up with. And so people see these other countries and they hear, wait, they don't have to pay anything. The government takes care of them. They can go to the doctor and they can get these operations, and it doesn't cost anything. The medication doesn't cost them anything. It's great. We ought to have that here. We're richer than they are, so we should have that where nobody has to pay for anything. But what they don't ever hear or see is that, well, yeah, that's fine. Hey, we're going to give you free health care, but you're going to wait 2 years before you can go see a doctor. You got a toothache.
And if your child has a disease or something that we can't cure because of socialized medicine doesn't advance, but you can go to another country and get it fixed, like the United States. We've seen this several times in the UK. They won't allow it, because if they allow it, then it tells the world and their people that socialized medicine is a failure,
right,
and that a free country that can do the research, that can make money off of the research and do things, is successful. So in order to support their narrative, people have to die. Yeah. And that has happened in the UK many times, and it's happened in other countries. And until that's the reason they want to get us on the same system, is so nobody can point to another country and say, hey, their system is better than ours. They might cost money, but they don't die for something that can be cured. So they got to get us on the same boat, so there's no one to point to. If there's no country to point to and say they're doing it right or doing it better, in this country back in the 50s, medical costs weren't that high. It's ever since the government got involved is when medical costs went up. And yes, there's been more advances since then. That's just over time that's going to happen. But once the government started getting involved in our healthcare back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, that's when the costs skyrocketed. Well, when government gets into any business or starts sticking their nose into anything, it gets more expensive and it gets less plentiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, also when the government decides what healthcare is, in other words, abortion is healthcare. It's not the murder of the child, and we're all going to pay for that. You're too old for hip replacement because you're no longer going to be a worker bee working for the government. You're not going to get that knee replacement, that hip replacement.
What did Obama say? Give your grandmother the pill, the pain pill?
Yep. They really did. They really were developing death panels. I know people laugh at it, but in total socialized medicine, they own your body.
What do you call the people who decided that those children, the few babies that young children in Britain couldn't get outside the country to get cured? Those are death panels. They made fun of Sarah Palin, like you said, for saying it. It was true. And we will face that in this country if we don't flip this around. And right now, the people that are, this is a little off topic, but right now the McCain and some of the Republicans are holding us back. We need to flip this back and get government out of healthcare. That will make it more plentiful and cheaper.
Well, I mean, it's not just healthcare either. It's people who are looking at these other countries. All they're seeing is the positive aspect in their mind. I get free this, I get free that. The government's going to provide this, the government's going to provide that. But what they're missing is when you set up that kind of government, you no longer get a choice as to what you're going to do. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to become a programmer. No, I'm sorry, you're not, because we have determined that we need more farmers. We need programmers. So you're going to go to a farm and you're going to farm the rest of your life.
I got to interject.
Taken away. And people don't understand that or see that. All they see is, oh, well, the government's going to provide everything. But they don't see the bad parts of it, because that's never shown when you start talking about these things. Just like when they're talking about socialized medicine, they don't tell you about the wait times and what's going on with that and the fact that they're going to let people die and things. You don't hear about that. And so people buy into this. It's great and wonderful without ever seeing the negative side.
I'll tell you what the disconnect is. I believe it was Cory Booker this week said, and he thought he was being really wise when he said it. And I'm pretty sure it was Cory Booker. He said, we live in a time now where college education is not always what people need in order to better themselves. He said, I have a degree in history and communications. I have to be a senator. He said, but other jobs are just as important that you don't have to go to school for, like computer programming and healthcare professionals. Look it up.
Yeah, some of our politicians are not that, well, they're not saying too much, but, you know, but really big government has a ton of problems. They own you. And let's go to the next slide and start looking at what God told the Israelites they were doing when they wanted a big central government like all the pagan nations around them.
I might be out of sequence. Is this are we looking at 1 Samuel 8 now?
1 Samuel 8:4, if you got that
8:4?
one.
All right, let me back up.
That's the one that was coming up next.
There we go. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, look, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord.
And we assume that Samuel realized that he'd have trouble with them if he didn't give them what they want, but he knew that it was an offense to God. So God answered him in the next couple verses. So let's look at the next slide and see how God answered him, because obviously God said, don't be too upset, Samuel.
All right, and now 1 Samuel 8:7. And the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also.
And it's interesting. God saw it clearly that what they really were doing was moving further away from God by getting into a big secular government.
And real quick, what did the communists have to do to pull people into communism? They needed evolution and to eliminate God. What did Karl Marx have to do? He had to eliminate God through evolution. Same thing.
And they taught the kids in the school. I think this is still true in communist China. One of my Chinese students told me, maybe a little more implied there, but only old people who don't know anything and are backwards still believe in God. All us middle-aged, modern elites, well-educated people, we believe in the government, not God. And that's what the communists have taught. And I guess China is still teaching it.
And Japan. Japan are proudly atheist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, the ones that I have talked with, as a rule, it's an atheist country. They have Shinto and Sokugakai and Taoism and some of that stuff, but it's not a lot. The atheism is taught in the schools.
Well, one Chinese student told me I think it was her grandmother, still believes in God, but that's about the only one. And that's normal. It's just the old people don't pay him too much attention. By the way, how well did that work out for the communist empire? Without ethics, it was an absolute nightmare. I have a book on this.
You know what?
Go ahead.
No, I find it interesting. There's a pattern. Once communism, socialism, however you want to do it, once they eliminate God, then they have to re-implement. They have to implement their own version of ethics or morality. They have to make morality, laws about morality and bring it back in, because if they don't, they get a lawless populace. So it's interesting that they go further than a freer nation does as far as morality. You see that in China, and you saw it in the Soviet Union, where they would be hardcore as far as trying. In other words, the people that went to the far left and tried to, like we have the gay movement and this movement and that movement, those were the first ones that they turned on once they implemented communism, because they had to get a hold of morality or else they lost their country. Mm-hmm. They couldn't control their people.
You kind of said it. We were created from the beginning in our DNA to worship. And if we don't have God, we will worship something. And it could be alcohol, or drugs, the state, money, sexual perversion, because we're never going to worship something godly. It's going to be gambling. It's going to be drugs. Yeah. Because if you remove God, then the only thing left is evil. And we were made to worship. Our psyche has to worship. So it will worship something other than God. And the state is trying to create this vacuum and then fill it with themselves so that they are worshipped. But it's not going to work. You can't.
By the way, people like Mao and Stalin and Hitler, but they literally had people worshiping them. The Little Red Book of Mao. Anyway, some unbelievably horrible things they did in their own country. They killed, I think Mao starved 40 million. Stalin starved maybe 7+ million, plus other bad things they did. It's unbelievable. And their books with a lot of details is very well documented. In other words, Israelites were saying, we want a king. In their own way, we want to worship a king, a hero on a white horse with bright armor and a beautiful cape, however that looked, like the other nations, instead of the God in heaven.
I think, and you're seeing that today with the left movement in this country wanting to be more like Europe, wanting to be more socialized, wanting to be, instead of having a representative republic, we want to have a more socialist or more, they call it democratic government, which we do not currently have in place. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a representative republic, period. Anybody that says anything else knows nothing about the country they live in.
And by the way, interesting thing I just learned the other day, when you read this section, God said, they're rejecting me as king. They want a human being as king. Thomas Paine, in his pamphlet, I realized it was propaganda for the American Revolution, Common Sense, but he did say, we no longer accept King George as our king. God is our king. And it sold 500,000 copies in America.
And you can see a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels with this country when it was created, between old Israel and where we're going now towards the Israel that wanted a king.
What I see when I read that scripture is that they lost faith in God. They couldn't see God. They couldn't talk to him the way they wanted to. And so they wanted a human that they could see, touch, feel, get mad at, be happy with. So they lost faith in God and put their faith in men. And that's what I see, the same thing. You know, when you talk about the government coming in and doing away with religion, I mean, our younger people today are further and further away from being religious than what they used to be. And so they lose that faith in a God, and then the government comes in and says, have faith in us. And
they fill the void.
Yeah,
the
and then what happens? Those people follow the government, they follow the government, they support this, they get it in place, and then the government turns on them. And they become puppets of the government to do what the government wants, when they want it, and how they want it.
Yeah,
ask what happened to the brown shirts in Nazi Germany.
Yep. Any government big enough to give you everything is big enough to take it away from you too.
Right. And our powers come from God. Our rights and our freedoms come from God, not from a state. And the left wants you to believe that it all comes from the state. That's the only way they can control you, if they can take it away.
Although this is another subject, but I think the founding fathers had the Second Amendment. Not that they wanted an armed revolution and all that sort of thing. I think they recognized, just through the American Revolution, that a populace that is armed is harder for the government to abuse.
Yep.
And didn't the American Revolution sort of prove that? I'm not saying the British didn't have great armies and Hessian mercenaries, but America, almost every American home had 1 or 2 rifles, almost every single one. And the Americans were pretty good shots too. I mean, the regular guys, that's a hard country to subdue.
Yeah,
right. I mean, and you know what? If other countries, I forget, was it Japan, said there's no way to invade America because there'll be a gun, there'll be an American with a gun behind every rock. There's no way that we've went through 2 world wars and nobody has tried to land on this continent and take us. Yeah.
I had a lady come up to me this week and she said there are X number of people in America. We average 2.5 guns per person in the country. And I said, how many guns do you own? She said 1. She goes, oh no, I'm a gun and a half short. I'll get it this week.
Good up, Dave.
She cracked me up. She goes, I'm getting a gun and a half this week.
It's not the same subject, but did you notice in our magazine Watch that high school in Texas, that was the one they won the big court case, saying that no prayer could be allowed, even on the football field, even led by the players. No prayer in that school anywhere, shape, or form. And the guy who shot up the school, by the way, was just regular guns, a revolver and a shotgun, nothing special, was a football player. So you could make the argument if he'd been hearing prayer all this time in high school and lower schools, maybe he wouldn't have been so crazy. Just thought.
No, I mean, I think it's a legitimate thought. I mean, I've heard people say, people wonder, well, where was God at when this happened? It's like, they say, what do you mean, where's he at? You forced him out. You told him to leave and never come into the school again and to leave your lives. So what do you mean, where is he? Why are you even asking that question? So I think there's some truth to that. When you put God out, you put his protections out too.
Let's go to the next slide. We're going to see what God, through Samuel, told the Israelites about big central government.
All right. 1 Samuel 8:11. And he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen. And some will run before his chariots, and he will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s. He will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers, and he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and he will give them to his servants. And he will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out in that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not hear you in that day.
There are countries, socialist countries, where more than 50% of their income is taxed away, and that doesn't include indirect taxes. There is no free lunch.
I know. I mean, you read those scriptures, and again, I'm like, it's what we were talking about a minute ago. People run out and they say, we want this kind of government, But yet, when you look through history at that kind of government, what happens? That's exactly what happens. You turn everything over to somebody in power who then begins to tell you everything you're going to do in your life. You no longer have choice. You no longer have the ability to go do what it is you want to do, to inspire to be, I'm going to be a great author. No, you're going to go over here and work in the sewer because that's where we need you at. And you don't have a choice anymore. And people, it's like, we want that. It's like, how can you want that? Because they just
not
don't
only
see it that
do you
way.
have a, not only will you not have a choice of what to do, you will not have a choice of what to buy. In the Soviet Union, if you wanted a TV, there was one manufacturer of TVs. The state manufactured everything, and you had to wait years to get that TV. And many people died because their houses burned down because the only TV manufactured had a faulty power supply. And because the government was making it, there was no incentive to change and improve the power supply. So people were dying. And if you could get a TV, it took years to do it. Same with the car. I seen a car one day when I was working at where I work. I went into one of the sites and the guy pulled up. What was the name of that car they made in the Soviet Union? Anybody remember?
Yeah, Yugo, I think.
Yugo. No, that was Yugoslavia. No. This was back in the Soviet days. What was that? No. I forget the name of it, but it was absolute. I seen it. The guy showed it to me. We were there half an hour looking at this thing, and this thing was an absolute piece of garbage. But that's the only thing you could get in the Soviet Union because the state made it, and if you wanted it, you had to wait years. It cost you a tremendous amount of money, and it was garbage.
It was Volkswagen.
Absolute garbage. What'd you say, Dave? What'd you say, Dave?
I said it's a VW.
No, you know what? A VW was 1,000 times better than this car.
All I know is after you explained all that, I don't know why I'm fighting this. I want me a ticket to one of them countries where I can just go and I don't have to do no thinking. Just be told what to do.
Ticket. There's one Stalinist state still left in the world. 100% Stalin. It's called North Korea. We'll get you a ticket next week.
Okay.
That's I will.
I'll be living a good life.
I'm just teasing. By the way, the famous Lord Acton historian said, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely." Joseph Stalin was the poster child of that. As he got more and more power, he abused the Russian people more and more. Hitler, National Socialist Party, because Hitler was a socialist too. They were just rivals of the communists. They were both socialists, but like close rivals can hate each other. Who's going to be the main one? Hitler had a lot of power, and he abused his power too. That's what happens. And that's why the founding fathers put in some checks and balances. You don't want to give too much power to anyone. And I don't even think we want government bureaucrats to have too much power.
No, that's the trouble. When they get power, power tends to corrupt, which is why Washington is as corrupt as it is.
Look at what we're looking at now with this guy Strzok. I would love to have asked him questions. Gohmert tried. Gohmert really tried. I'd have got him. I'd have got him good, But I mean, look at this. I mean, you're going to go ahead and say Hillary's exonerate Hillary before the investigation was done. Come on. But at the same time, he doesn't want to be, walking his dog and have somebody drive up on a motorcycle and drop him with a shotgun.
I like the statement that he said that I went to Walmart and those I could smell those Trump supporters. But then he said, that doesn't prove I hate people or I'm biased. I'm just like, he literally is like, and you expect, never mind, people to believe that, I guess.
Strzok said he was in Southern Virginia. He was in your area, Kelly, where when he gets the Trump supporters. How does that make you feel, Kelly?
Well, you got to understand. You got to understand where it's coming from. And say, I have a firm philosophy. If I don't care about your opinion don't matter. So I really don't care what he has to say. He means nothing to me.
Hey, just a side note, is that the most evil-looking, arrogant person you've ever seen in your life? The memes that are coming out of that thing are just unbelievable.
I mean, it's just, yeah, there's just so much arrogance. Like, you know, who are you to even be questioning me? I mean,
1940s, he'd be in front of a firing squad. Look what they did to the Rosenbergs.
Rosenbergs, yeah, absolutely.
Who did 1/10 of what Hillary's done, even a tenth.
Well,
they did sell our nuclear secrets to the Soviets, who didn't have it at the time.
Yeah, and then
but
Hillary killed Finicum and ran the Bundys off a ranch to get the uranium to sell to them so they could enrich it. My opinion.
One thing that they call it the deep state. There's too much power in Washington. The bureaucracy's gotten too big. And we're seeing just a little bit of what the prophet Samuel was talking about. And by the way, God, through a rainstorm, got the people to admit that they were wrong. We might go through the next two slides rather quickly. It just basically proves that God gave them a sign to show them he did not like this big central government having a king instead of God. But that's what they, apparently, even after the warning, they still wanted it.
All right, 1 Samuel 12:6. Then Samuel said to the people, "It is the Lord who raised up Moses and Aaron, and who brought your fathers up from the land of Egypt. Now therefore stand still, that I may reason with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous acts of the Lord, which he did to you and your fathers. When Jacob had gone into Egypt, and your fathers cried out to the Lord, then the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt, and made them dwell in this place. And the Lord sent Zerubbabel, Bidan, and Japhet, that Samuel, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you dwelt in safety."
Let's go to the next slide where they went through this big rainstorm where God sent them that sign to prove they were wrong.
All right. Is today not the wheat harvest? I will call to the Lord, and he will send thunder and rain, that you may perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord, in asking a king for yourselves. And so Samuel called to the Lord, and said, the Lord sent thunder and rain that day. And all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. And all the people said to Samuel, "Pray for your servants to the Lord and your God, that we may not die, for we have added to all our sins the evil of asking a king for ourselves."
And I want to go to the next part of this. People will ask, well, you don't want big government, but is capitalism good or bad? And does the Bible have any opinion on capitalism? Obviously, people can abuse money, love money too much, and that's clearly biblical. You shouldn't love money too much. But on balance, the Bible supports capitalism, supports private ownership. And I think people need to realize it. God does support charity. And I want to mention one thing about socialist and communist governments. Like when Venezuela went communist, they stole or nationalized a bunch of private industries and banks and foreign investments. And that was going to make the people of Venezuela richer and better lives, right? We all know what happened. Venezuela is a hellhole where people fight and riot in grocery stores because they're starving. The average Venezuelan has lost 25 pounds. They eat out of garbage cans. I mean, by the way, the communists disarmed the law-abiding people when they took over the country too, by the way. It's been an absolute disaster. And I think of this. When you violate one of God's laws, like the 8th commandment on stealing, and the government steals private property without recompense, it'll come back to bite you. Anything you do that violates God's law is harmful. For instance, a country like Venezuela, after you've nationalized all that foreign industry in your country and banks, in the future, are you going to get any future investments from outside the country? Can you imagine somebody at a board of directors meeting of some many global corporations or private investors? Oh, we need to invest in Venezuela. They hit him inside there. Are you crazy? They'll steal it from us. Capital dries up. And the capital that can get out of the country, wealthy people can get their money out of the country, do it so quickly. And you discover that by stealing capital, you actually end up with less capital.
Yep. Absolutely.
And
socialism has failed every single time it's been tried.
And America is still the center of world investment, still the biggest economy, because I think we've had, I don't know the exact length of years, but a long time, probably maybe 2 centuries, where investors know that if they invest in America, their investment is safe from government seizure, et cetera, et cetera. And that's good for America.
Yep. And we're becoming more capitalists since the current administration than I've seen almost in my lifetime.
As a matter of fact, I realize prosperity is a multi-pronged thing, but the fact that they got that tax bill, that was, I mean, people have talked about reforming the tax codes. You could do it on one sheet of paper and lowering these business taxes. They've been talking about that for years. The fact that Congress, especially the Senate, with so little margin for error, that they got that true for President Trump, that tax bill is bringing foreign capital back to America, creating jobs. I guess we'll see how it all works out, but we're almost at full employment.
Oh yeah, everybody who wants a job can get one. Somebody, I mean, many of them are getting 2 and 3 because there's so many out there.
And the people are making money because they're coming in my place and spending it. You know.
I told my son. I tried to make this clear to my son. If anybody, anytime in your lifetime, wanted to start your own business, now is the time to do it. If you want to start a business, do it now. Be the best that you can be at it. Do better than those around you. And when everything falls out and the economy goes south again, you will stand and the rest will go away.
Because capital is safer now. It's taxed less now. Even the death tax that got off the books, unless you're super, super, super rich, that really, like, say if you have a small grocery store, maybe it's worth almost $1 million, and the father who started dies, his sons can't keep that business going. The death tax will destroy it, or many big farms. I mean, but now, starting next year, the death tax is gone. That saves a lot of upper middle class people can continue to move up when the father dies. And I just thought for years, why doesn't our government get rid of the death tax? It just doesn't make any sense. But they couldn't get the politicians to do it. So finally, somebody got it done, and I'm amazed.
And now that they've lowered taxes, the tax receipts are higher than they've ever been.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Let me see if I understand now. So I need to die next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that's what we were saying.
Or at least till we get a Democrat president and they reverse everything.
You know what? I thought that I was going to die during the last one, and I made it. So he who endures until the end. The same.
There you go. There you go.
Let's go to our next slide.
All right. Ecclesiastes 11:1. Put out your bread on the face of the waters, for after a long time it will come back to you again. Give a part to 7 or even to 8, because you will have no knowledge of the evil which will be on the earth.
Now, I checked the commentaries. Here's what they say about those two, and then there's some other verses further down that elaborate on it. It's saying diversify your investments, and in the long run, it'll benefit you. And I believe it. I've heard people write up stories that if you were to buy a mutual fund with different stocks when you were like 30 years old, and you just put a certain amount of money in it on a regular basis, When you retire, you would be a millionaire. Even though stocks go up and down, the long run trajectory has been up. With mutual funds, even if certain companies go down, others will go up. And that's why he said give it to 7 or 8. Some will go down, some will go up. You never know what will be up. In other words, don't put all your investments, say, in oil or real estate or whatever you think. And they all agree that's an investment strategy. And the whole book of Ecclesiastes is about enjoying life until it's over, because it's short. But that means using your money wisely. That's a capitalist principle, and it's in the Bible. And I was kind of amazed that a capitalist principle is in the Bible. And there's some other verses in Ecclesiastes that reinforce that that's what it means.
Yep. You know, I would say just as a warning for any Christian or anyone who is trying to learn more about the Bible, anyone who comes to you and they are an atheist or they're trying to prove a socialist point, if they start quoting scripture, ignore them, run, because they don't believe any of it to begin with, and they're just trying to use it against you.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no comprehension on what it really means. They're just trying to pull a verse out and stick it in your face to try and get you to join their cause. They are lying to you. They are not to be believed or followed.
The Bible really does. And, you know, some of the best people in the Bible were wealthy. God blessed them with wealth, like Abraham. Wealth
Christ
is not
was
necessarily bad.
They play that Christ was poor, but I mean, there's evidence that he owned a home or two or more, and he was a builder. And he, you know, a modern day builder is not a poor person. I mean, especially, I mean, you know that Christ was doing a good job of whatever he took on. So he was probably the best builder around.
And let's just say he was a contractor, subcontractor. Note that when he died, his coat was so valuable that the Roman soldiers gambled over it. Now, remember, these Roman soldiers, you know, they got paid and they got plunder, if you know what I mean by plunder. They're not like they're totally poor, and they get to steal and take stuff. And you know how it is. Why would they gamble over some average guy's coat?
Yeah, they would. They couldn't have cared less. And they talk about John the Baptist. His I think it was what, camel hair or whatever his coat. Some people think that he was, you know, dirt poor because of what he owned. As far as, I mean, some of the best material can be described. I mean, is this some, you know, a fine coat that he may have owned. People use the Bible to, especially people who don't believe in it, use it to promote their own ideology. Be wary of them. Don't listen to them.
Yeah. We probably don't need to get into the next two scriptures, which are about talents, where God, and it could be a talent of gold or other, or silver. It's kind of spiritual and physical, but Christ gives an example of a big lord who had a lot of money, and he rewards his followers for making their investments pay off. But doesn't that, and that's in more than one place in the Bible, doesn't that prove that if anything, the Bible leans more toward capitalism than it does big wasteful government?
These two parables are capitalist principles.
Yeah.
And
build on what you have, invest it, turn it, create more wealth from it.
Let me give an opinion. This is probably a dangerous opinion, but right now the stock market may be volatile because they're doing some tough trade negotiations. But I would tell people, if you own stock, especially if it's a wide variety, don't panic. Give them some time. The stock market will be back up, and America's economic fundamentals right now are very sound. So that means the stock should go up. You know, now obviously something bad could happen that no one can foresee, but there's some stocks, even during the Great Depression, they went down, but they came back afterwards and were worth quite a bit. If you got P&G stock and you bought it way back in the days of the soap operas when they first started in the 1920s, man, that stock is divided and worth a lot today. So I'm saying the capitalist system has value in the long run. You just have to be patient and most of all, don't listen to our media. Our media will make you think our economy is about to collapse. The administration is about to collapse. Our enemies will turn on us at any second. I think it's hyperbole because they have an agenda.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
Because if it collapses, then they are correct and they can promote their ideology.
I hope I'm right about the stock market. I know that's a gamble, but I really believe it's true. It will be back up pretty soon.
Well, also, if you listen to them and you go close out all your stocks, you cash them in, you have nothing in the market, then you stay poor, and they're always in control of you. Either way, it's a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they want the state to be your god. They don't want you to be self-reliant.
Yeah, I know a guy that just went and took everything he had. He's got no investment, zero, zip, zilch. And he says, they're not getting my money. And I'm like, yeah, they just did because you spend it. In fact, I'm selling him something on Sunday.
I do believe in saving too. If you can afford, many people can't, but if you can afford to save a little bit, it'll pay off in the future. Save what you can. Put it in bank CDs if you don't trust anybody. But I do think some part of it you could put in a mutual fund, and you'll probably be okay in the long run. Well, let's see, David, tell us about the campaign you have coming up.
Well, we got our little invitation in the mail today. Of course, I was already planning on being there, but they've mailed out cards and invitations, and I'm feeling positive about it. So not so positive about the actual venue because they can't seem to get anything straight, but we're having to hold their hand through every step right down to it will be coffee, But it's feeling good. We set up a Facebook page here, and we're going to hook that with our local website, and then we're going to boost it and try to get something going there as well. So feeling pretty good.
And those of you that are out there that like to see some of us in person and meet some church people, we're going to be at some place called the Feast of Tabernacles, which is in the Bible. And Paul kept these holy days. You'll see that in the New Testament. We'll be at Westgate, Branson Woods, and Branson on September 24th to October 1st.
And we'll be at
Myrtle Beach and Panama City, Florida, Tyler, Texas, out in California at
Tahoe.
Lake Tahoe. And you know what? I was going to share this too. If you're interested in what you hear here, and you want to find a local church, here's a list. And you can get there through the intercontinentalchurchofgod.org, and you look for IC Church Towns. Here's a list of, if you're anywhere near any of these locations, you can find yourself a group of people that think and believe the same way that we bring here every Friday night. So, or you just go to ICG, and you can, there is a place down here where you can contact, I don't know where it's at. There's a place you can contact and just ask questions and ask for, there's local websites, church town lists, the feast information, which if you've never been to a feast, you really should try it. It's like nothing you've ever experienced in your life. And we do not run around in loincloths and sacrifice chickens at midnight. Just so you know, we're not that. We don't do any of that. Very simple. You wouldn't even know we were in a organization that believed what the Bible actually said.
And then want to change the schedule.
What's that? You will have to change the schedule.
Yeah.
So we're going to put that on for Friday night. Now we're going to do the loincloth and the chicken.
Yeah.
Woo, yeah. Okay, good. All right. I didn't ever, hey, whatever works.
And I might mention, Kelly, Ken, and myself will be doing a Bible study at Myrtle Beach Friday night. Any details you want to mention, Kelly?
Yes, David will be there too.
Yep, we'll have David, and actually, I'm getting quite a few more people, maybe from other groups that are going to be coming to Myrtle Beach this year that I've talked to. So it could be quite an interesting year in Myrtle Beach this year. So if you want to come by and just see some entertainment, I guess you would might be a good idea to hit Myrtle Beach this year. So yeah, there'll be a lot of us there. So
Landmark Hotel.
Landmark Hotel, yeah, new and improved.
Newly renovated.
I'm taking Kelly's word on that. So, again, this was episode 254. We appreciate all those who tune in. I do get your emails. We get your contact when you fill out the web pages. Sometimes it's not always that we can respond because you don't leave an email. Then I don't make phone calls to people, but we appreciate that you do watch, and we do go through that. So again, we thank all those from all over that do watch us, and we hope to see you all again here next week on Line Upon Line. So we'd like to say good night, everyone, and we hope you all have a wonderful Sabbath.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.